Goed, we zijn weer terug van pauze en gaan nu verder met deel 2 van het seminar. We werken regelmatig samen met andere verenigingen die iets met brandveiligheid doen. En dit jaar hebben we bij het samenstellen van ons programma hulp gekregen van de IFE. De IFE is een internationale vereniging en zij hebben ons in contact gebracht met Adam Kors van de IFE Midwestern tak. Adam werkt bij Avon Fire and Rescue Service en heeft jarenlang onderzoek gedaan naar incidenten met een dodelijke afloop. Ernstige ongevallen en ook bijna ongevallen. En sinds juni 2017 is hij voor de IFE bezig met de IFE Firefighter Safety Database, waarin informatie wordt verzameld over slachtoffers onder brandweerlieden. Het doel is delen om te leren. En Adam gaat hier alles over vertellen in zijn presentatie. Deze presentatie is net als die van Birgitte vooraf opgenomen. En ook dit keer hebben we na afloop van de presentatie weer een live verbinding met Adam. Dus vragen mogen weer in de chat. Dan gaan we nu naar de presentatie van Adam.
Hello, and thank you very much for inviting me to present to you today about the Institution of Fire Engineers Firefighter Safety Database. It's a great privilege to be asked to speak at your conference, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to ask if there's a problem with firefighter and public safety in the built and natural environments. The main focus is going to be on the fire problem within the built environment, not so much the natural environment, although I do make a couple of references to that. I believe that we often fail to look holistically at global problems, and fire is just one example of that. I'm going to explore the link between firefighter safety, public safety, and the built environment, the natural environment, and sustainability. I'm going to offer a partial solution, not a silver bullet, but I will offer a potential mechanism that can, at the very least, help, and that is the IFE Firefighter Safety Database. I'm going to talk about the database's overarching project intentions. I'm going to discuss how the database and how a potential IFE Fire Safety Database can help as well. I'm going to make some acknowledgements and then hopefully answer some questions and have a discussion as well at the end. So is there a problem with firefighter and public safety in the built and natural environments? Evidently there is. We see numerous facade fires, typically on high-rise buildings, but it's not limited to high-rise buildings. One such example where 72 people died in 2017 was obviously Grenfell Tower, and I would suggest that the majority of people around the world will have some awareness of this incident. If you at the moment call this the pinnacle in terms of severity of this type of incident, the consequences of it have been far-reaching on a global scale. But did it have to be like this? I think we should think about medium-rise and lower-rise buildings as well. We are seeing numerous buildings being destroyed. Not so many lives lost, I accept that, but is it acceptable for people to lose their homes and businesses in this way because of, there's a few varying reasons, but essentially because of a lack of knowledge at some point in the chain, from either planning, design, construction, maybe regulation, and a number of other issues, to the point where these buildings are getting completely destroyed on an alarming frequency on a global scale. Is there an issue with wildfires, wildland fires? Yeah, evidently there is. We are seeing an intensity and higher frequency of wildland fires in countries that are used to these types of incidents. And we're seeing fires like these occurring up in, for example, even the Arctic Circle and other countries that you wouldn't normally expect this. We're seeing the wildland urban interface in some areas being completely destroyed on wide scale, wide area basis, with literally thousands of homes and businesses being destroyed on a regular scale. So is there an issue there? Yeah, absolutely. The focus today, however, is on the built environment fire problem, and I just want to show you a little collection of videos just to highlight some of the issues. You may have seen some of these. The sound is off. I'm going to talk over the videos. I'm also just going to stop my video so that you can focus on the videos rather than see my my face up in the corner. Incident happened in Baku in Azerbaijan on the 10th of April. Do you think Grenfell Tower was a rapid fire development? If that is the case, what do you think this fire development was? Quite incredible speed of development here. This was the first of 2 incidents in Baku. The second one happened on the 19th of May, 5 weeks after this incident. Nobody was injured this particular incident. How would you deal with this as firefighters? What tactics would you deploy? Really quite incredible. This is the second incident. Only this time, 5 weeks later, 15 people died in the city. Styrofoam was being used for the external facade. The city authorities began a program of removing all of the combustible facades off of, I believe, all of their buildings after this. Here's another one, this time in China. I don't know what year this was, but really quite incredible fire behaviour. How do you deal with this as firefighters? How would you deal with this type of incident? I don't know whether this is a construction site or whether it's an occupied building. There is approximately 20 odd floors, but the whole facade of the building is going up in flames literally within seconds. What's gone wrong? How can a building behave like this when it's on fire? Where's the failures? Design, planning, regulation, construction. Firefighters didn't create this. I think we need to look at solutions holistically. We must look abroad for answers and solutions. We will not have all of the answers on our own in any one country. So if we don't share information, how are we all going to collectively learn? This is the CCTV building, again in China. There was a hotel above this building. This fire happened in 2009, just a few weeks before the building was occupied. It was ready for occupation. And clearly that sort of scale fire is going to clearly overrun any sprinkler supplies. Good job it wasn't occupied. Somebody thought it was a good idea to put fireworks on the outside of the building, which had a combustible external facade. We're also seeing some buildings that catch fire collapse. This one in Sao Paulo, 2018. Is this something we should expect? It was an abandoned building squatted by up to 90 families, 26 stories high. At least one person died at the incident, possibly more. This building here is the Plasco building in Tehran, 2017. It was built in 1962. 17 floors, 20 firefighters lost their lives at this incident. Not a modern methods of construction building by any stretch. Are we expecting buildings to behave like this? Is it reasonable to expect this sort of behaviour? Really quite a tragic incident. This is the Duson Sporium Sports Centre in Jecheon in South Korea. The fire started with electrical cabling in the car park area, spread to some vehicles. Smoke was able to spread throughout the building. Some fire resistance, compartmentation issues. 29 people died. It's not just newer buildings. This is 1973 on the Isle of Man, Summerland. 50 people died here. Combustible oroglass and galbestos and acrylic sheeting. So combustible facades is not necessarily something that we haven't seen before. It's not all about modern methods of construction. This is Joelma building in Brazil, 1974. 179 people died here. It's a 25-story building. No sprinklers at the time. No automatic fire detection. Numerous other fire safety issues. tragic fire. Longer video available, quite a brutal video, lots of people jumping. We learn all of the lessons from the older incidents, never mind the newer incidents that happen. What lessons are there to learn? Are there lessons with design issues, construction issues? Are there post-build defects? Who creates the issues? Would greater awareness of the issues help with decision making? This incident happened in Bristol in 2019, the Premier Inn Hotel. This is the early stages of the fire. The building was essentially destroyed. 9 buildings of modern methods of construction were completely destroyed in the UK in 2019. This is the Beachmere Assisted Living and Extra Care building. This originally had a stay put policy. Some quick thinking from, as I understand it, the watch manager who was first on scene got everybody out. The building was eventually completely destroyed. The fire started in the roof. Quite incredible fire behaviour there. We feel with our knowledge of this type of building in firefighters' minds, regard the sort of lightweight construction materials, modern methods of construction that we often see, and this is in the backdrop of less resource, less experiential learning, less incidents being attended, for example, maybe changing approaches to the lengths of training courses. This is the Samuel Garsdale House in London, again in 2019, 20 flats. Wooden balconies with the main mechanism of spread. Is it reasonable to ask about awareness in designers' minds, planners' minds, regulators' minds, construction professionals, tradespersons, fire engineers? Is it reasonable to expect trainers and instructors, teachers to know information about this sort of these sorts of buildings and how they can behave in fire? How can they understand this sort of fire behaviour if they don't have accessible information to the incidents? Where do they get that information? Some of that fire behaviour there with the fire spreading to the left underneath the balconies, it reminds me a little bit of the Bradford City football stand fire, where you've got almost an open air flashover occurring. You can see the timber, some of the floors just being preheated by the flame as it encroaches, as it sort of moves leftwards. This fire happened in San Antonio in Texas on the 19th of February this year, literally very recently. Some issues with frozen hydrants in Texas. Should buildings behave like this? Yeah, there were some water issues, but should the building still behave like this? Really quite incredible fire development. Interestingly, also in Texas, the next day, a hotel of similar construction was basically razed to the ground. Frozen sprinklers were a factor there as well. What's interesting is there is a fire phenomena that happens out of one of these windows. Now, the majority of the air is moving to the left of the picture here. There's a reasonable draft, if you like, reasonable wind. And then this fire phenomena happens here. You've got a jet of flame coming out of that window that is going in the opposite direction to the general air movement. I don't know if that's, it's clearly a forced draft fire, whether it's a wind-driven fire or there's something else happening here. I really don't know. I don't know if there's a name for this phenomena. I'm going to show you 2 other incidents that have a very, what appears to be a similar phenomena in a second, but the building was completely destroyed. And firefighters didn't create this issue at the end of the day. A lot of people lose their homes here. We had several of these again in 2019. This is the Alpha Lanes bowling alley in 2019 in the States. Look at this fire development. What name do we put to this? I met a guy called Peter McBride, and he inspired me. He gave me this video, actually. I met him at the International Fire Instructors Workshop Conference. I'll credit him with giving me this information. What do we call this? Has anybody got a name for it? Incredible jet of flame. Don't think that's a wind-driven fire. Maybe some sort of decelerated backdraft. Some more research needs to go on there. Really quite incredible. Apparently no excessive fuel loading in that building. In this building, this is Los Angeles, this is a butane hash oil factory in 2020. You could argue that there was excessive fuel loading. However, the fire behaviour, again, is just incredible. And I wonder how many times this has been happening. We're just not aware of it. Are firefighters in your service, are they aware of it in your country, in your local service? The wind is moving, the general wind direction is moving opposite to the jet of flame coming out of the building there. I wonder how many people in the UK, for example, have seen this sort of fire behaviour. Do you think we ever know enough about building construction, whether it's traditional or modern methods? Do we know enough about how buildings behave in fire? Do we know enough about fire development? Quite incredible scene there. Multiple firefighters were injured there, some of them really quite severely. We often fail to look holistically at global problems, and as I mentioned, fire is just an example of this. Why are we here at this event? What's your interest? Why have you come here? What have you come here to learn? Is there a national fire problem with your country? Is there a global fire problem? Indeed, is a question. This image is Earthwise. It was taken on Christmas Eve 1968 by William Anders, who's on board Apollo 8. And this is the first opportunity for humankind to look back at our planet from a different point of view. We've never seen it like this before. It has significant meaning to the environmental movement, and in Life's 100 Photographs That Changed the World, the wilderness photographer Galen Rowell called Earthwise the most influential environmental photograph that's ever been taken. Sometimes we need to take a different angle of view on a global scale. And my question is, do we need to do that with fire? Do we need to think more holistically and with a more interdisciplinary approach to fire, and maybe the way we learn about it? How is sustainability related to fire? How is this related to the built environment now? When did the first concerns about sustainability and the natural environment, when did the environmental movement start? Some say it was the 27th of September 1962 with the publication of Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. If she hadn't have written that book, the awareness about organochlorine pesticides, would it have been there? Who knows? Without that book, no birds in the trees, literally, would have been the potential. So she raised awareness about a particular issue, a global issue that would have affected us all. And there's lots of global environmental issues. But of course, this all, whether that was the first and the most important thing, it all depends on the point of view, doesn't it? Sustainability from a United Nations point of view, well, the first UN Environment and Sustainable Development Conference happened in Stockholm, 1972. Then there was the Rio Earth Summit in 1992. Agenda 21, UN Framework on Climate Change, the Convention on Biological Diversity fell out of that. And there were subsequent conferences, more or less every 2 or 3 years following that. The United Nations Climate Change Conferences, which are different, 27 of those so far. Next one's in Glasgow, 21. First one was in Berlin, 1995. More well-known ones are Kyoto, 97, where the Kyoto Protocol fell out, and Paris, where the Paris Accords and the Paris Agreement fell out of. What does this mean to the built and natural environment in relation? Basically, it's about reducing anthropogenic carbon dioxide emissions. And from a fire perspective, this means insulating old buildings, much better insulation of new buildings, and less energy intensive construction materials. And there's a global need to think about this from a cradle to grave point of view regarding carbon dioxide emissions, as much as there is other issues that result from these changes in many ways. So why is this important to us all, including construction professionals and fire professionals, fire engineers and firefighters? Because if we, especially our leaders in all areas, don't think about this holistically and on a global scale, we're going to have later problems. Think about the carbon benefits and the losses with a total loss of a building or significant damage to it, where it requires demolition and basically restart due to a fire. And there's the potential of having to go back and correct mistakes later because certain consequences in relation to fire weren't thought about. And the cladding crisis in the UK is one example, but this isn't just a UK issue. There's different construction materials in modern methods of construction. Timber's definitely not a new construction material, and it is here to stay. There's no question about that. There's different fuel loadings, and these buildings behave in different ways in relation to fire. Is there an issue with these types of buildings? I would argue, yes, clearly. Is there an issue with the traditional built environment? Yes, clearly. We still see traditional built buildings get destroyed in fire, but is it the same frequency? Is it the same intensity? So it varies. Is there an issue with rising CO2 levels, changing climatic patterns, and the wildland-urban interface regarding wildfires? Yes, the frequency of these fires is increasing, and the intensity is increasing as well. So the overarching intentions of the firefighter database and the potential fire safety database is basically to create a one-stop shop for information on firefighter and public safety related to fire and other emergency incidents involving the built and natural environments. It's about providing a hub of information and easy access to it. It's about providing a mechanism, not the only mechanism, but a mechanism for sharing, learning and understanding about incidents that hurt firefighters or members of the public. Often there's a significant crossover with those two types of incident. This is about raising awareness about common repetitive issues we keep seeing in incidents, not just fires. You can't solve a problem unless we know what the problem is. This is about helping develop toolboxes so that decision makers can be better prepared and make better decisions in relation to fire. And in terms of firefighting, fire engineering and construction, if we don't give our new recruits and even our more experienced hands, our new stars in the construction industry, if we just give them a toolbox with a couple of tools and expect them to get on with the job, then aren't we asking for problems? We need to give them appropriate tools in a well-stocked toolbox to be able to get on and do the job as required. So how can the firefighter safety database and the potential fire safety database help? This is about raising awareness about incidents, not just incidents, but also, for example, emerging technologies, different risks. We've seen lots of emerging risks in relation to waste management, the way we generate energy, for example, the way we store energy. We see lots of issues with transportation methods, whether it's on the road or at sea to some degree as well. There's a lot there that we need to raise awareness about, and having databases of incidents and information that is easily accessible and available to firefighters, to people that are building buildings, designing them, planning them, fire engineers, fire investigators, people that work in all sectors of the fire sector, all levels of the fire sector, all levels of the construction industry, and importantly, people who teach people in those sectors to do their jobs, to do their roles. I think that is really important. There's information available for risk assessors, regulators, guidance writers, planners, fire engineers, academics, and other professionals involved with the built environment design, construction, building management, environmental management, regulation, for example. You can be the highest qualified fire engineer. You can be the most important building designer in the world. You could be chief fire officer of the largest fire brigade. You could be a new recruit just starting out, a degree in fire engineering or some sort of construction related discipline. You could be a supervisor on a construction site, or you've just started your job. But if you don't understand how incidents have gone wrong in relation to your role, then I'm not sure how you're going to make truly effective decisions on a collective basis. You know, sometimes the seemingly small things get missed at incidents or on building sites. You know, you miss a fire, a cavity barrier, you miss the right number of plasterboard screws in a building that requires appropriate number of screws in plasterboard, and there's a fire and then it gets into the cavities. Just as a, just a couple of examples there, then are we going to see problems? Yes, potentially. And we see issues, for example, with the traditional built environment in relation to firefighting. We see lots of, unfortunately, common repetitive failings because fairly often, all too frequently, firefighters don't understand the way fire behaves, where it can behave, or they don't fully understand the built environment. I'd like to show you the database. I'm just going to drag this window over. I'm going to show you the database and show you some incidents here. You can find the database online. This is how it is at the moment. In time, you'll be able to access the database via country, via incident type, and then by the severity, whether it was a fatality, whether it was a serious accident, near miss, or whether it was an incident of interest as well, where, for example, nobody was hurt. There is a selection of incidents that are already on there. I'm just going to drop into a couple of these and just focus. They're in date order, primarily in the UK at the moment, but there are incidents from New Zealand, from the United States, from the Netherlands. There's incidents from Azerbaijan, for example. So if we have a look at, for example, the Cross Docklands 2014, this was a very interesting incident on a personal level because it enabled me to get information about aluminium composite materials, and I was able to learn more about those materials than I ever learned from the fire service. There was some information, some really useful reports that were put up and submitted by the Melbourne Fire Brigade, and I think that enables people to, if they want to really understand these types of incidents. We also have access to the reports. They're name redacted where necessary. We don't redact the deceased names, and you can access video footage as well where appropriate. You'll be able to access the Fire and Rescue Services main summaries and findings, if that's there, if it's been provided, and you can access links to other resources as well. I just want to go back to incidents of interest. This is another section, and I think that this section has the potential to expand out into the fire safety database. And I mentioned in the video the incidents that had occurred in Azerbaijan, and there's some information on these. This is the one that killed 15 people. Managed to get some photographs that were very kindly provided from Azerbaijan, from Baku. Spoke to a journalist over there, and there's numerous links to videos. There's no report available. There are incidents involving wildland fires Just going to scroll back here, scroll back down to the bottom. There's incidents involving wildland fires, for example. The car fire here in 2018, just as an example. And again, a similar process. There's a summary, there's a brief synopsis, there's some images, and then there's accessible reports. That incident was actually, we had the incident data page published while the incident was still ongoing. I just want to show you a Dutch incident as well. Very kindly, Ricardo Weaver was very helpful with this particular incident. This happened in 2008 in De Punt. 3 firefighters died, including a female firefighter, and we've created a data sheet here. We've got the report in English and in Dutch, and we've also got some video footage. And I know the Dutch Fire Service learned a great deal about smoke gas explosions here. Is there value for other countries in learning about this incident? Absolutely. Do we in the UK know enough about smoke gas explosions? No. We've had incidents where similar fire development, fire behaviour has occurred. But if we don't continually learn and understand about these types of incidents from other countries, and I think this is the value, the true value of the IFE, it being a truly international organisation, then we're going to have potential problems. Ricardo also provided a voiceover to a training video on this as well. So a team of firefighters could, for example, watch the video, have a voiceover, and get information from that if they're on a drill night, if it's an on-call station, for example, or on a watch, it's raining, don't want to go out into the yard. There's lots of learning here, and you can have discussions about that. And the New Zealand Fire Service have also provided a great number of incidents as well, which is of great benefit there, and a lot of them with these training videos as well. In terms of acknowledgements, I just want to thank, there's a number of people. I'm not going to read all of this. If people want the copies of the slides, there's a lot of people that have been involved with getting the firefighter safety database to where it is. A lot of people around the world, lots of UK fire and rescue services, but I particularly want to mention my parent service, Avon Fire and Rescue Service, and thank my chief, Mick Crennell, my ACFO, in particular, Rob Davis, Simon Shilton, John Day, who was a retired deputy, and my previous chief fire officer, Kevin Pearson. I want to make a really big thank you, because there's a huge number of people there. I will literally be here for half an hour if I thank everyone individually. Is there a problem with firefighter safety and public safety in the built environments and the natural environments? Yes, there is. We looked at the built environment mainly today. I think we need to look at global problems, especially fire, more holistically. We explored the link between firefighter safety, public safety, the built environment, the natural environment, and sustainability. I think there is a partial solution, which is the IFE Firefighter Safety Database and the way we share global information on fire-related issues. I think the intentions are clear. Hopefully there's an intention of sharing knowledge at any part of the organisations, and hopefully you can see how the database can help. I then made some acknowledgements, and I'd invite any questions and any discussion. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Intussen is bij ons aan tafel geschoven Matthijs van Ballengooien van Kiwa FSS. En met z'n drieën gaan we nu in een live verbinding met Adam het even hebben over zijn presentatie. Als het goed is die verbinding nu tot stand gekomen. Adam, can you hear us?
Yes, hi, how are you?
Hi, we're fine, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for your presentation, and also, of course, for joining us at this conversation. Matthijs, please go ahead.
Yes, hi Adam, this is Matthijs. Good to have you here in the studio. We of course have some questions. I have some questions for you, and also from the audience we have some questions. And the first question is that you mentioned in your presentation the old style building materials and new style building materials. Can you give us from your research what are the developments in this area and what are the trends we are facing?
I think the common trends are quite simply a lack of understanding about how buildings should be constructed, in particular in relation to things like passive fire protection, cavity barriers as an example, as well as how certain building materials behave in a fire. We see issues with certain materials, certain combustible materials, and we also see issues with value engineering. So buildings being constructed or engineered, fire engineered in particular, so that they have a narrower window of failure, and then we get construction issues or sometimes post-construction issues, and it has the potential to lead to more severe outcomes. And I think often that's about a lack of understanding about how buildings should be built or the materials should be used. Sometimes there's issues with regulation as well, I would argue. I think there's an issue, one thing that has become apparent, there's an issue about enclosed car park spaces and how they can behave in fire. We're often modelling on heat release rates of vehicles that were constructed anything from 10 to 15 years ago, depending on the research that's being used, when in reality, quite often the vehicles are going to produce much higher heat release rates. And there's a number of examples of failures in buildings in passive fire protection where smoke spread throughout buildings and has killed people. Or we've had flashovers in car parks where maybe a few years ago we weren't necessarily expecting that.
Yeah.
We're looking at other innovative construction materials that are going to be used at far more frequency. Cross-laminated timber is a good example. It doesn't mean it's wrong at all. I'm not saying that. It's about how we use these materials. Those sorts of materials are here to stay, but how they're built and when they're in use in very tall buildings, which is a lot of plans, and you add in potential new technologies such as energy generation, importantly energy storage systems, then and other emerging risks, then there's going to be some really interesting potential problems to solve. Just yesterday, there was a high-rise fire in China. I don't know if anyone's aware of that. Again, another full high-rise fire. The day before that, on Monday, there was a fire in India where 4 firefighters were killed and 5 others, at least 9 people. So there's lots of issues. That wasn't a facade building, but the one in China yesterday was. So I hope that answers your question.
About this typical issue, there is some questions from the audience. One of the is Thijs Geertsema. Seeing these videos make my stomach turn. What caused these horrific fires to develop and deaths? And is there something we as fire engineers, protection specialists can do to prevent these deaths? And he is wondering if these buildings are compliant to building codes and laws. What do you think?
I can't speak for the compliance of those buildings individually. I can make assumptions sat in a chair looking at YouTube videos, and I would suggest possibly not, because something has gone wrong somewhere. I can't speak for the compliance in other countries, but certainly from a UK perspective, what's coming out of the Grenfell Tower inquiry is incredibly interesting. So there's failures, and I'm not sure you can pinpoint it at any single failure. There's a number of issues there that have all basically holes that have lined up to create a bigger end result. But I think one of the most important things that we can do, clearly, is learn from the incidents when they happen all around the world. And at least it raises our awareness. And it's not just about raising awareness in firefighters' minds or fire engineers' minds. This is about people that work in construction. It's about people who design buildings, plan them, regulate them. It's about people that get involved in a building's life at any stage. From the dream of building something to essentially when it gets demolished, the whole cradle to grave approach. I think
because another question from the audience is that you mentioned your database and doing statistical analysis. One of the questions from Ruud van Liemt is that there is statistical analysis of the database to gain insight from these fatalities? Can you give us an answer for that?
It depends on what buildings he's talking about. If he's talking about things like high-rise buildings, then no, there isn't enough data there yet on that database. From a UK firefighter perspective, then yes, there is. I'm currently engaged in a PhD and working through that as we speak. But for all of the other incidents, then no. I mean, there's collections there's the odd paper out there that highlights. There's the odd academic paper that highlights the number of buildings, but from the database point of view, the bit that relates to public fire safety specifically, building fires that don't necessarily injure or kill firefighters, then there's not enough data out there at the moment. It's not all in one place.
Okay.
If that makes sense. But if we haven't got all of that information gathered in one place, then how's anyone going to be able to analyze it and look at it? So it's a work in progress.
Okay. Hi, Adam. My name is Liewe de Witte. I'm from the Institute for Safety from the Netherlands. I think we met a couple of years ago at the exchange of experts at our institute. I've also a question, and it's more a personal question. You worked a long time at this database, and actually it's excellent work, I think. So if you look back, what is the most important learning point for yourself if you look at the database?
For myself?
Yes.
Have patience. Have patience and a bit of perseverance.
Yeah, a lot of perseverance, I think, or not?
Yeah. No, I think it is about having patience, but it's also about, if I'm really honest with you, I mean, it's about finding personal balance with this as well, because it's been an incredibly interesting journey. But it has required a bit of patience. So I think that's been my biggest lesson throughout this so far.
Okay, a good answer, I think. Back to the database itself, it's a huge source of information, and I think you established a database on a global scale to combine all kind of things together. So if you look at the database how it is now, what in your opinion would be the next step for this database and the usage of it?
Right, the vision would be that there is every country provides information about their firefighter safety related incidents, so their reports, their accident reports, investigations, and all the related training material, for example. It started, the United States has provided a lot, New Zealand's provided a lot, but I think there's so much more out there. I'd love more from a load more European countries. I think there's, the Netherlands, there's a Dutch incident there, but there's so much more to share and learn. But I would also like it to expand out into all the high-rise buildings that we have, all of these low-rise that we have, all these other incidents that are occurring, and for people to contribute on that scale. And that section, that what I was calling phase 2, whether it's the fire safety database or whether it's just another section of the firefighter safety database, I think that is a massive part of it. And at the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned, that could potentially have thousands of incidents. In some of the developing countries, we still see people that are losing their lives in incidents that we had 50 years ago, and we still have problems in the UK. But you're seeing real basic fire safety failings, killing scores of people.
Yeah. So do you think that we don't learn enough then, or not fast enough?
No, not at all. No,
okay.
Not.
Maybe some last question from the audience. There is a question about the risk-based viewpoint, and it's quite clear these cases are not the goal of a good design. In most countries, however, risk assessment is only applicable, included codes and standards. What do you think about that? The generic approach of those countries causes those fires. What's your opinion about it?
Can you just repeat that, just so I just
Now, the question is about the most risk assessments are based on codes and standards. So not about a risk-based viewpoint, but more about standards. So do you think that the fires that occur contributes to those standards and not based on a risk-based viewpoint?
If I've understood this correctly, if you risk assess purely to guides, codes, standards, that's normally how it works, but that's only as good as the guides and the codes and the standards are written. If there are incidents that are happening that don't have those risks, for example, emerging risks included in the guidance, the codes and the standards, then guess what? It's up to the risk assessor to potentially identify that. He might fall foul of actually being able to do anything about that. But, you know, if you're risk assessing just to guides, codes and standards, then it's only as good as the guides, codes and standards are. And, you know, evidently, you haven't got to look far from a UK perspective, and you're seeing problems there. There is change coming out of the Grenfell Tower inquiry, as an example. You know, there's a building safety bill, fire safety bill, and some new changes there that will encompass additional things, and it will have to be done, enforced under the fire safety order, for example. So therefore, it will be risk assessed. Things like front doors to flats, things like external facades. But if it isn't there in the first place, then the risk assessor isn't going to assess it, and then we're potentially going to have problems. So, and I see that as well. I've seen that in the past. So, you know, it's to some extent it's on risk assessors to be able to identify issues, but also anyone can risk assess to a guide and a code and a standard. But you know, the craft of the risk assessor is sometimes, you know, not necessarily just in assessing or enforcing to those guides and codes. You know, sometimes there's got to be some flexibility, but at the same time, there's got to be enough of a view to see the risks as they are. And I don't see how one is going to do that if you don't understand how buildings have caught fire, if you don't understand about the incidents. I might have waffled a bit there. I hope that was a clear answer.
Yes, it was, Adam. Thank you so much. I think we can talk about this for a lot more time, but unfortunately we are out of time now. So thank you so much for your contribution. We see you next time, I think.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for the invitation. And,
yes, of course.
I'm glad I could help.
Okay, well, thank you and have a nice day.
Lovely to meet you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.